The morning in a Paleolithic camp would not have begun with a strict division of labor. Recent studies, which have re-examined archaeological evidence and analyzed female physiology, have found little to support the idea of rigidly defined gender roles. In fact, evidence of gender equality has been found in ancient artifacts, terry habits, and burial customs for approximately 3 million years. It appears that both men and women participated in the crucial task of subsistence for their communities. A significant part of this revised understanding comes from the revelation that women were physically capable of and actively participated in hunting. The idea that female anatomy was a barrier to hunting is being systematically dismantled. Research into female physiology suggests that women may have even held an advantage in certain types of hunting, particularly those requiring endurance. The hormone estrogen, more prominent in women, plays a key role in increasing fat metabolism, which provides muscles with a longer-lasting energy source and aids in muscle regulation, preventing them from wearing down. This would have made women particularly well-suited for persistence hunting, a technique that involved chasing prey over long distances until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Archaeological finds are corroborating this physiological evidence. In Peru, at the Willamaya Pacha site, a 9,000-year-old burial of a young woman was discovered with a comprehensive toolkit for hunting and butchering big game. This was not an isolated case. Review of other burial sites from the late Pleistocene and early Holocene in the Americas has revealed other instances of women being interred with hunting weapons. These discoveries suggest that women's roles as hunters were not an anomaly but a significant part of their societies. Beyond the big game hunt, women were instrumental in acquiring other sources of protein. The importance of hunting small game, fishing, and gathering shellfish has often been underestimated by researchers. And these were all activities that women were likely heavily involved in. The traditional role of gatherer also requires a significant revaluation. Far from being a simple task of picking berries, gathering required an encyclopedic knowledge of the local environment. Women needed to know which plants were edible when they were in season, how to process them to neutralize toxins, and where to find them across vast territories. This knowledge was a crucial and reliable source of nutrition that often formed the majority of a community's diet, ensuring survival when large hunts were unsuccessful. These women were, in essence, the first botanists and scientists, constantly observing and experimenting to determine what was safe and what was medicinal. The daily life of a prehistoric woman was also filled with skilled craftsmanship. Toolmaking was a significant part of their day, crafting everything from cutting implements to projectile points. The discovery of grinding stones in Israel, dating back at least 12,000 years, suggests that the routine processing of grains and the baking of bread were part of their culinary repertoire. They were also responsible for making clothing from animal hides, using tools like needles and scrapers. Furthermore, the artistic and spiritual life of the community was not solely the domain of men. The iconic hand stencils found in ancient caves, once assumed to be male, have been largely identified as belonging to women. This suggests that women were not just subjects of art, but were also the artists themselves, creating the spectacular animal paintings that adorn cave walls. Some researchers now theorize that if women were the primary creators of this art, they likely held a more significant role in the social and spiritual functioning of their societies than previously believed. Evidence from burial sites, where some women were interred with elaborate grave goods and ritual objects, points to their status as spiritual leaders or shamans. Child rearing was, of course, a vital part of their lives, but even this was likely a communal effort. Etchings from a Paleolithic site in Germany show a woman with a baby carrier on her back, which would have freed her hands for other tasks like foraging and hunting. Family structures were likely flexible, with a strong sense of community and shared responsibility for the young. In essence, it's a popular story of what cave women did today has undergone a radical transformation. They were not confined to the domestic sphere. They were hunters, innovators, artists, and leaders whose daily lives were varied, demanding, and absolutely essential to the survival and flourishing of their communities. The emerging picture is one of a partnership where the contributions of all members of the group were vital and respected. This new understanding doesn't just change our view of the past, it enriches our understanding of the full scope of human capability and resilience. The narrative continues to unfold, moving beyond the hunt to explore the broader landscape of a prehistoric woman's daily contributions. The very concept of survival of the fittest is being re-examined through a lens of cooperation and communal effort, where the roles of women were not just supportive, but foundational. One of the most persistent and misleading images is that of the nuclear family in a cave, a brutish hunter, father, a stay-at-home mother, and their children. This model, heavily influenced by 19th and 20th century societal norms, is now considered largely inaccurate for the Paleolithic era. For the vast majority of human evolution, to the advent of agriculture about 12,000 years ago, there is little to no evidence for this kind of social structure or a strict gendered division of labor. Historic life was likely organized around larger, more nomadic bands where survival depended on the combined efforts of everyone within this communal setting. Child rearing was almost certainly a shared responsibility. The idea of cooperative breeding, where mothers received help from fathers, grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and other members of the tribe, is now widely accepted. This elaborate system was not just a convenience, it was a crucial evolutionary strategy. It freed up individuals, including mothers, to contribute to other essential tasks like foraging, hunting, and tool making. Archaeological finds, like an etching of a woman with a baby carrier on her back from the Gersdorf site in Germany, provide a tangible glimpse into how women balanced childcare with other duties, keeping their hands free for the day's work. Furthermore, the notion that women were constantly pregnant is being challenged by new understandings of their diet and lifestyle. Studies of skeletal remains suggest that children were often breastfed until the age of 4, a practice known to naturally reduce fertility. This longer interval between births would have allowed women to be highly active and integral members of the mobile hunter-gatherer society. The gatherer aspect of a woman's life, long depicted as a passive and secondary activity, was, in reality, a highly skilled and vital economic contribution. It required a deep scientific understanding of botany, ecology, and even chemistry. These women possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of their environment, knowing which plants were nutritious, which were medicinal, and which were toxic. They understood the seasons, the growth cycles of different plants, and the best methods for processing them to make them edible and safe. This reliable source of food, which often constituted the bulk of the community's caloric intake, was the bedrock of their survival, providing a crucial buffer when large game hunting was unsuccessful. Recent analysis of dental plaque on Neanderthal teeth has even revealed that their diets were rich in starches and grains, challenging the popular meat-heavy paleo diet myth and highlighting the importance of gathered plant matter. Its detailed knowledge extended to more than just food. Women were likely the first to discover the medicinal properties of various herbs and plants, acting as the community's healers. They would have also been instrumental in finding and processing pigments used for art and rituals. The image of a woman returning to camp with a basket of berries is a gross oversimplification of a role that required immense intellectual and practical skill. Artistic expression. One of the defining characteristics of Homo sapiens was also a domain where women were not just present, but were likely prominent figures. For many years, it was assumed that the magnificent cave paintings of animals were created by male hunters recounting their exploits. However, a growing body of evidence suggests that many of these prehistoric artists were women. Okay? An analysis of the hand stencils often found alongside the paintings, okay, based on the relative lengths of fingers, indicates that approximately 75% of them were likely made by women. Okay? This finding has profound implications, okay, suggesting that women were not only creating art for ritual or storytelling purposes, but were also likely central figures in the spiritual and ceremonial life of their communities. The famous Venus figurines, small statues of female figures with exaggerated features found across Europe, have long been the subject of debate. While some have interpreted them as fertility symbols created by men, another compelling theory is that they were self-portraits created by women. The unique perspective, with an emphasis on the breast and abdomen, as one would see looking down at their own body, supports this idea, regardless of their exact purpose. The sheer number of these female representations suggests the high regard in which women were held within these societies. The final resting places of the dead also offer compelling clues about social structures across Paleolithic burial sites. There is a notable lack of difference in the way men and women were treated in death. The presence of valuable grave goods, including tools and ornaments, in the burials of both sexes suggests a society where social status was not rigidly defined by gender. The previously mentioned burial of the Willamaya Pacha woman in Peru, with her extensive hunting toolkit, is a prime example. Analysis of other sites from the same period in the Americas revealed that of 27 individuals buried with big game hunting tools whose sex could be determined, 11 were female, suggesting that women may have made up 30 to 50% of such hunters. These are not the burials of passive gatherers. They are the honored remains of respected and active members of the community. In conclusion, the story of what cave women actually did all day is being rewritten from the ground up. Outdated image of a submissive woman confined to the cave is being replaced by a far more dynamic and accurate picture of a skilled hunter, a knowledgeable scientist of the natural world, a creative artist, and a vital community leader. They were not simply helping the men. They were partners in every sense of the word. Their days were a complex tapestry of physically demanding and intellectually challenging tasks that ensured the survival, innovation, and cultural richness of our earliest ancestors. This evolving narrative doesn't just give us a more accurate view of our distant past. It challenges us to reconsider the deep-seated biases that have for too long shaped our understanding of human history. The prehistoric world, it turns out, was a far more equitable place than we had been led to believe, delving deeper into the fabric of daily Paleolithic life reveals that a woman's influence extended far beyond the immediate tasks of subsistence and into the very social and intellectual heart of her community. The emerging picture is not just one of shared labor, but of a society whose structure, knowledge, perhaps even its language, were profoundly shaped by its female members. A crucial element in this revised understanding is the concept of the grandmother hypothesis. This evolutionary theory posits that human longevity beyond the reproductive years is not a biological accident, but a key adaptation. Older women, who were past childbearing age, played an indispensable role in the survival of their kin by helping to provision their daughters and care for their grandchildren. These experienced matriarchs allowed their own children to have more offspring, more closely spaced, tasked. This communal child rearing, centered around female kinship, created a powerful social safety net and a conduit for the transfer of knowledge. A grandmother's lifetime of accumulated wisdom about plant lore, tool-making techniques, social navigation, and resource locations was an invaluable asset to the entire group. This role cements the idea that women were not isolated figures, but the central nodes of a complex, multi-generational support system that was fundamental to human success. This social structure was likely highly egalitarian and cooperative. Far cry from the hierarchical, male-dominated societies that would emerge much later in human history. In a small, mobile band where everyone's contribution was essential. For survival, social status was more likely earned through skill, knowledge, and wisdom, rather than being predetermined by gender or lineage. The fluid nature of these groups, which likely broke apart and reformed based on seasons and resource availability, would have discouraged the accumulation of power and possessions. In this context, the social intelligence and diplomatic skills necessary to maintain group cohesion would have been highly valued. Women, as central figures in kinship networks and masters of a wide range of essential skills, were likely key players in managing social relationships and making collective decisions for the group. Furthermore, the daily activities of women were a hotbed of innovation. The simple act of gathering was, in fact, a continuous process of scientific experimentation. Which nut is easiest to crack? How can this toxic root be processed to make it edible? When is the optimal time to harvest these seeds for maximum yield? Answering these questions required observation, hypothesis testing, and the development of new technologies. The invention of weaving and textiles, for instance, likely originated from the need to create baskets for carrying gathered goods, nets for catching small animals, and slings for carrying infants. These were not minor inventions. They were revolutionary. Technologies that made life easier, more efficient, and more secure. The creation of cordage twisting plant fibers into string was a foundational technology that enabled a cascade of other innovations. From fishing lines and nets to snares, woven bags, and even the hafting of stone points onto spears. Given their deep knowledge of plants and fibers, it is highly probable that women were the primary drivers of this string revolution. Similarly, the control of fire, one of humanity's most significant achievements, was not a one-time discovery, but an ongoing process of management and refinement. Women would have been central to maintaining the hearth, the heart of the camp, and developing the culinary techniques like roasting, boiling, and grinding that unlocked new sources of nutrition and made food safer to eat. The discovery of 30,000-year-old woven fabrics in the Jujuana Cave in Georgia provides tangible proof of this ancient and sophisticated fibercraft. That the intellectual life of the community was also deeply intertwined with the roles women played. Storytelling, a fundamental human activity for transmitting culture, history, and survival knowledge, would have been a daily occurrence. As the primary caregivers for young children and the keepers of extensive knowledge about the landscape and its resources, women would have been natural storytellers. They would have woven narratives that taught children which plants were safe, how to navigate the territory, and the social rules of the group. These stories, shared around the campfire, were the community's living library, and women were its most important librarians. Some linguists and anthropologists even speculate that the very structure of early language may have been influenced by the interactions between mothers and infants. The Calandra response, the melodic intonations, and the emotional bonding central to this relationship may have formed a crucial scaffold for the development of more complex communication. This entire way of life, which characterized the human experience for millions of years, began to shift with the advent of agriculture around 12,000 years ago. Its nomadic bands settled into permanent villages. Concepts of land ownership, surplus accumulation, and inherited wealth began to take root. This transition had profound and, for women, often negative consequences. A more sedentary lifestyle led to higher birth rates, tying women more closely to the domestic sphere. The focus shifted from communal gathering grounds to privately owned fields, and labor became more rigidly divided. As societies grew larger and more complex, patriarchal structures and social hierarchies began to emerge, gradually eroding the more egalitarian dynamics of the hunter-gatherer era. The myth of man, the hunter, woman, the gatherer is, in many ways, a projection of these more recent post-agricultural gender roles back onto a deep past where they simply did not fit. Therefore, to continue the story of what a cave woman did all day is to appreciate the full sweep of her contributions as a prime mover of human evolution. She was not a passive bystander to the great drama of survival. She was a central actor, a provider who hunted and gathered with equal skill, an innovator whose technological advancements made life possible, a social strategist who built the cooperative networks that defined our species, and a cultural custodian who passed down the knowledge and stories that formed the foundation of human society. The modern story of prehistoric women is a celebration of this rediscovered reality, a narrative that restores balance to our understanding of the past and provides a richer, more accurate account of our shared human journey.